Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program executive editor of Above the Law, legal editor of WNYC's More Perfect, contributor at The Nation magazine, Elie Mystal, on his latest piece, Donald Trump and the Plot to Take Over the Courts. Elie, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
I will say that, and what you've done out here is basically outline the broad structures and the statistics of Donald Trump's really, I would say, just I want to say court packing, but it's not actually court packing in the way that we know, but his ability to sort of yes, I mean to fill the courts up with his nominees in a way that is really sort of, I think, unprecedented in terms of numbers. And then you go into detail on 7 of the judges that represent this. I will tell you right now, because I think this is the most important thing for people to understand about this era. If you do more pieces on this and you end up doing all 160 or so of judges, we will have you back each time to talk about each one of them. Well, I really do think it's that important. And I don't think that people understand sort of the dimensions of what we're dealing with in terms of the change here. We can elect a president and a Congress and a Senate, and they can propose a wish dream, a wish list of things for folks like me. But the courts can basically say, not going to happen. And yeah. I don't know if folks on the left appreciate that. It's not my favorite part of the American system of governance, but it appears to be we're moving into a new era. Before we talk about that new era and the specific judges, give us those numbers and just put them into context in terms of what Donald Trump has done. And it's not really Donald Trump, it's Mitch McConnell, but what the right has been able to do in terms of reshaping our the complexion, and I mean that both ways, I guess, of the judiciary.
Yeah, so at this point, Donald Trump has, and Mitch McConnell have confirmed 123 federal judges, and that's as of, when I wrote the piece. I think actually today it might be 127 based on last week. 123 federal judges or so, including 41 judges to the Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the level right below the Supreme Court. By comparison, by this point in Barack Obama's presidency, he had only confirmed 19 Circuit Court of Appeals judges. So that means that right now 14% of the entire federal judiciary is made up of Trump judges. 22% of the Circuit Court of Appeals is made up of Trump judges. And, of course, 22% of the Supreme Court is made up of Trump judges, as he has 2 of the 9 slots there. He's been able to do this because Mitch McConnell is the Darth Vader of our story here, okay? Everybody remembers, or everybody was kind of alerted to the fact that Mitch McConnell is a problem when he blocked Barack Obama's nominee to the Supreme Court, Merrick Garland. But Merrick Garland, the blocking of that nomination was the capstone on a nearly, years-long effort to stymie Obama appointees. He was stymieing Obama appointees when he was the minority leader, to say nothing of what he was able to basically completely stop the train when he was majority leader. So that when Donald Trump took office, there were 106 federal vacancies open in our judiciary. I don't know if that's a record because I imagine that George Washington had quite a few judicial vacancies to fill when he became president. But, other than that, there were an unprecedented amount of openings for Donald Trump, which is why he has been able to appoint judges at an unprecedented rate.
Now, there's a couple points I want to make here. One, when we compare Obama to Trump in terms of where they are with appointments to the Senate, to the judiciary, people have to remember that Obama, that was the peak of control that Democrats had over the process, right? Up to this point, because they had 2 years of almost a filibuster-proof majority at that time. They had, maybe it was like an 8-month period of a filibuster majority, maybe a little bit longer in between Franken seating and Scott Brown getting elected. But they had some period of time of that. It's Trump is going to have the majority for the next year or so, so another 25% of his term. And it's very possible that the Senate remains in the hands of the Republicans. The other thing is, we should also note, too, that Barack Obama, my understanding is, did a poor job of getting on the ball quickly, the administration, in terms of lining up those judges. It seemed to take a long time. I know they were obstructionists. There's no doubt about that. But I've heard from other folks that Obama was a little bit slow. They did not emphasize this when they came in.
I agree with that criticism, but I like to retcon that criticism as not just a criticism on Barack Obama and his administration. I think that's actually a criticism on the entire progressive structure,
yes,
on the entire liberal movement. We, as liberals, have dropped the ball on judicial appointments for far too long. So that let's put it like this, when Trump comes into office with 106 openings. Remember, we're talking about Donald Trump. He doesn't know the difference between the Supreme Court and traffic court, all right? Like, this is not his idea. What has happened is that McConnell, and especially these outside nonprofit groups like the Federalist Society, which is the big one, but also the Heritage Foundation, also the Judicial Crisis Network, like, there is an entire kind of federal Republican judicial kind of think tank industry that has been grooming, incubating, training, promoting, and putting conservative-minded people in positions to be plucked and put on the federal courts at a moment's notice, right? They have a raft of these people, and that is what liberals do not have. Right, we have not done the work. We have not done the organizational work to have our own raft of 200 potential judicial nominees ready to pounce whenever there is an opening to put somebody on a court. So yes, was the administration a little bit slow on the ball? Did they not particularly emphasize this part of their duties enough? I totally agree with that criticism. But that criticism goes to all of us. You know, that criticism goes to the entire leftist movement.
I agree with that. And we should also say, too, there's one other, I guess, sort of wrinkle in this, is that it appears now that if you want to be placed in the federal judiciary, you need to go and be a member of the Federalist Society. And in the Federalist Society, you will be indoctrinated to the conservative movement legal doctrine, which runs the gamut to what I think are more sort of high-profile issues on the left in terms of social issues, but also stuff like the Chevron doctrine and the role of agencies in the way that they relate to the government, and a whole host of sort of notions about closing the courtroom doors to people and et cetera, et cetera. There is no real analog on the left. To the extent that there is, it's the American Constitution Society. And that appears now, it seems to me, because I think it was like Ted Lieu, there was a couple of people who were brought up in front of the Senate or had to step down from their nominations because of their association with the ACS. And that becomes problematic because if I'm a young lawyer wanting to get into that sort of like that potential feeder for the federal judiciary, I know that maybe that's not a good sign. I got to keep a lower profile.
I mean, you're talking about Goodwin Lieu, not Ted Lieu, but yeah, I mean, the Republicans play to win. The Republicans play to win this game. They play it hard, and they play it. They have so far played it correctly, right? So yes, if you are a liberal person and you work for the ACS, the American Constitutional Society, or even if you work for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, if you work for the ACLU, the conservatives will slam you as being some kind of extreme leftist for your association with those organizations. But the Federalist Society, which is the most extreme right-wing legal group out there, if you're associated with the Federal Society, well, that's just being a normal Republican, folks. And the Democrats, when they get their chances, when they get their opportunities at confirmation hearings to have the microphone, they don't slam the Federal Society. They don't bring to light how truly reactionary this group of people are. And it's a huge problem. The other problem with that problem, though, is part of how it goes to the elitism in the legal profession in general. And I think a lot of your listeners can understand that or were alerted to that during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, where they saw, so many elite legal scholars rally, left or right, rally around Brett Kavanaugh as a good guy and a normal jurist and certainly not a horrible perjurer, right up until Christine Blasey Ford showed up, and then at least the liberals were like, oh, maybe this guy isn't the right one, right? So one of the reasons why the Federal Society kind of goes under the radar is because they get people while they're young. The Federal Society is all over law schools, right? They find people with right leanings in law school, and they start indoctrinating, training them, literally giving. I went to Harvard Law School. They have the best food of any group, having an event. And so they get them there, and they make it so that it's all part of one kind of elitist community that even liberals have a hard time, apparently, some of them, speaking out against when they get their opportunities.